So, final question, Eileen. When's the book come out?
I don't know. It's just trying to get through this thing.
Come on, you got to be talking about it, because there's a great book there. There is, and you'll see that when you read the 10 articles.
And if you're interested in reading any of these actual documents, we've posted hundreds of pages of internal police documents from the demographics unit, from the mosque crawlers, at ap.org/NYPD. And all of our stories are up there. You know, we kept running even after we submitted 10 for the Pulitzer, but we've written a lot more. And all of our police, not all of them, but a lot of the police files we put up online.
Well, on behalf of all the grizzled old journalists in the audience, myself included, great job.
Thanks.
Great job. Now, I have to ask, is Frank McGrath here? Frank? Patrick McGrath. That's you, right?
Yes.
I want to thank Patrick, too, because this is what's great about the Hill. So we had 3 programs, and then we heard from Patrick McGrath who says, I've got a great idea for a program. There are 3 of our neighbors that won the Pulitzer Prize. How about bringing them in to tell us about it? Patrick's a great idea, and thank you. And, yeah. So you see, participatory democracy here. And if you don't like Kathleen Sebelius for next month, then give us a better idea. All right, let's, first question.
I'll be really quick. Great reporting. 2 questions. Number 1, how did you find out about the story? And number 2 is, New York City is a vast city. And, you know, so did the New York City Police Department also go into neighboring jurisdictions, I mean, in New Jersey and other places, because there's a large Muslim community, but there's also, they actually, you know, some might live in New Jersey, that whole situation. So can you just talk about that? And one last question is, what is Mayor Bloomberg's relationship with the Muslim community now? Because if you have a relationship with a person who takes a picture with you and you leverage that relationship, and then all of a sudden you find out he's spying, that you're having him followed, I would not be a very happy person if that happened to myself. So.
All right. You remember all 3? How'd you find out about it?
Matt can start with that.
Adam Goldman and I were reported, Cliff's Notes is Adam Goldman and I were reporting on some CIA-related stories, and in the process of talking to people on those stories, they were tangentially involved in NYPD stuff, and, you know, we had mentioned that in passing, and we started reporting on it. It's just how you do any story, just shoe leather. It just happened to be something we heard.
And went after it. And it developed into a big story. And we did talk a little bit about other jurisdictions, but Eileen?
Yes, they did go into other jurisdictions. I mean, Jersey City was really upset to find out that that they were there collecting intelligence.
Newark.
You know, in Newark, yeah. So they, and that the politicians there were up in arms, but they also infiltrated some student groups in universities in New York and outside of New York, and I think it was Mayor Bloomberg who came out and basically said, we can do this anywhere.
Right. And on the student group front,
Connecticut, New Jersey, I know you mentioned Washington State. Yes,
yeah, I mean, on the student group front, I mean, they used these undercover officers to go as pose as students and go on Muslim student outings and write down, you know, how many times they were praying and what they were talking about, or go on their paintball outings, and they would attend their meetings, attend their lectures. They monitored all the websites and listservs of all the Muslim student groups that, you know, from all around the Northeast, you know, Yale, Columbia, NYU. Students were put in police files for forwarding informations about lectures of professors of Islamic studies who were going to be attending a lecture at, you know, SUNY Buffalo, for instance. So.
And how about you were referring to the imam who was Bloomberg's confidant partner?
Right. Well, he had moved out of the state before he found out about this the spying that was going on, and the relationship is strained in some of the communities for sure. But also, I mean, another one of the imams who is, you know, in many photos with the mayor and the police commissioner, whose mosques were being looked at too, he still is, he considers himself a partner, and he feels very strongly that even though this is going on and he may feel it's wrong, that cutting off ties with the police department is wrong, that that's not what you want to do. You need to have a relationship. And so other members of the Muslim community don't want him with having a relationship with the politicians because they disagree with that. But that's how New York works.
You might tell briefly, Matt, the story of how you begin the very first article about the landlord.
Yeah, so New Brunswick, New Jersey, which is the flagship town of Rutgers University. There's an apartment building just off the main drag, and a landlord there was making a maintenance check because there had been a gas leak, I guess, somewhere a few days earlier, and some alarms had gone off. So he knocked on the door, nobody answered. He opened the door. He walks in, and there's this sort of computer equipment, and there's like terrorist literature and maps and diagrams all over this apartment. And he's like, oh my God, there's a terrorist cell in my building. So he calls 911. The New Brunswick Police Department reports out. The FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force reports out. And they get there and they start looking through, and they look through like the closet, and they start seeing NYPD jackets, and and it's pretty clear that what it turns out is, and like NYPD pay stubs. I mean, what it turns out is like that this is a safe house where they're running their New Jersey undercover operations from. And nobody in New Brunswick knew about it. Nobody in the nobody in New Jersey knew about it. And that's pretty common.
Busted.
Yeah.
Right. I saw a hand up. Yes, Megan. Yes, please. Your microphone is. I asked that.
Is this?
Yeah. Perfect.
Speaking as a grizzled old journalist, I also have a couple of questions.
It's okay.
One, I don't understand how the White House can just give money to New York. Maybe you could explain how that works. And two, as AP, you're a news service. Where was this series published? Did you have any problems with that? What were the major places that it was published or recorded or whatever? And three, could you tell us a little bit more about how you got that story? I mean, you're in Washington, your other person's in Boston, you're writing about New York. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Why don't you take the first one?
Okay.
About the White House.
The White House. There is a very popular grant called the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Grant. And this was created at the height of the drug war, and it was to help build relationships among law enforcement agencies locally to fight the drug problem. And after 9/11, there were big concerns that drugs and terrorism were tied together. And in some cases, that's accurate, but it's not the type of terrorism that NYPD is really, really focused on. And they started using some of the money from the HIDA grant for terrorism, and they moved the intelligence division and the HIDA program work out of the same offices, and they work off the same computers, and there are HIDA seals on some of the intelligence reports. And it was explained to me that that's just because that's their operating platform. It's like Google, which it's not. It's a like computer. And so that, that's how it was explained to me. Some of the money is used for the surveillance cars, and those cars have been used to just collect license plates of people going in and out of mosques. And that's, the FBI is not allowed to do that. That's sort of one of the first things that they tell their people as an example that they're not allowed to do. And so the White House says that it's a separate program. Sure, the email addresses are whitehouse.gov and it's a White House office, but they don't have any idea how the money is spent. They have no control over it. They are not operational. And so it just ended there.
On the sort of how we did the story and why we did it out of Washington, I mean, we found out about it in Washington. I mean, we certainly consulted with our colleagues in New York. Chris Hawley, who was in Boston now, only recently moved to Boston. He was based in New York. He moved to Boston. He took a job at Raytheon. So he's left journalism and is much better financially for it. But we did have Chris was in New York. The three of us, Eileen, Adam, and I spent a lot of time on Amtrak to and from New York. My wife endured a lot of nights alone. But we did it by just trying to talk to as many people and meet as many people. And while I think a lot of people assumed that the sort of primary sources on this were from sort of disgruntled, folks, in a lot of ways, a lot of the guys we were talking to had been doing this for a long time and said, look, this is what we do, and we should be proud of that, and we should be willing to talk about it, and if it's good, the way to get support for it nationally is to put it out there. Because look, one of the things that this series is all about is, if this is the best way to fight terrorism, then let's make it a best practice and let's put it everywhere. Because New York is, while it's the main target, it's not the only target. So let's make it, if this is the way to do it, let's do it. And if it's not the best way to do it, then why the hell would we want New York to be doing anything other than the best way? And that's kind of the answer that we've been posing. Like, let's have the discussion. Is this the best way to do it, or is it not?
And with some transparency, one could add too. And Megan's third question was, I'll be right to you, is where these articles were published. Was there any pattern to that? And did anybody say, oh, this is too hot to handle?
They got a lot of play nationally, and they did play in New York, especially online. These stories were long, and we timed them to be released typically in the morning when they were going to get the best internet readership. But they did run. The Times didn't run them, but certainly the tabloids ran them on their websites. All the major clearinghouses, Yahoo, MSN, USA Today, etc.
And tabloids that editorialized against the stories too.
What do you mean? Against what what you were reporting on, or against your
us.
reporting?
Against us.
Against you?
For reporting.
For reporting on this? Yeah, how dare you tell the public what's going on?